So that culture of ideation and safe space and yes and has unlocked huge ideas that are in a year ahead or a 5-year roadmap, or things, the show is happening in 3 weeks and we're like, oh my God, that is such a cool build. Let's add that in there. We can totally do that.
Welcome to No More Bad Events, a fun and insightful podcast for professional event organizers and for anyone at any level interested in producing nothing but the best events. Each week, we'll talk with legendary event professionals to get an inside look into what they think makes a great event. And in the process, we'll draw out insider secrets, non-traditional approaches, and compelling stories from the most captivating personalities in the business. No More Bad Events is produced and presented by eSpeakers, the most trusted online platform for the best keynote speakers in the world. And I'm your host, Scott Bloom, comedian, event MC, and now your podcast host. Let's get started. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for dropping by. We really appreciate it. I want to take this time to say a quick hello to our loyal listeners. I think you know who you are. And you know what? I'm going to extend that moniker to anyone who's listened to at least one other episode. You are now a loyal listener. Whether you like it or not, you're a loyal listener. Now, some of you might be thinking, hey, Scott, it seems like you set the bar pretty low to be called a loyal listener. Yeah, you make a good point, but I was just trying to include as many listeners as I can. And so as not to disappoint our fans who listen all the time, then you are now bumped up to a loyal, dedicated super fan. So you're in a class by yourself, and I want to say I really appreciate you. Now, I know we also have some first-time listeners, welcome, who stop by because they want to hear what my guest today has to say. So thank you for being here. Whether you're a first-time listener or a frequent listener, you're really going to enjoy this episode. My guest today is the charmingly delightful Kathryn Frankson. Now, we had such a great conversation, and I learned so much. She's smart, she's articulate, and she really knows what she's talking about. Now, you might think that the director of global marketing for Money20, the world's biggest, most influential gathering of the global money ecosystem, might be a serious button-up financial professional. Well, that she is, but she's also a strategic and creative dynamo who isn't restricted by conventional norms. Kathryn isn't afraid to go out there to talk with her stakeholders about their ideas, and she isn't afraid to entertain even the craziest concepts as long as they're in line with objectives and audience needs. She's gutsy and always looking for the most provocative and on-point approaches. And Kathryn doesn't hold back. She likes the cadence and crescendo that comes in building out campaigns. She likes a really sharp hook and headline. And she no doubt has delivered campaigns that get noticed. Campaigns like sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And I love this one, Who the F Knows? Yeah, that was one of them. And as you know, the F, of course, stood for FinTech. Bottom line, she has 3 principles she lives by in creating nothing but the best events. Her team thrives on a culture of collaboration, ideation, and innovation. And she does none of it without embedding herself in the industry to understand what's needed, so that she can formulate the story and help curate it with the right voices. It's done with intent and by design, all of which foster a vibrant environment where groundbreaking approaches come to life to generate success. And there's so much more. Great insights, great stories, great fun. Okay, I think loyal listeners, first-time listeners, and loyal, dedicated super fans, I think we're ready. It's time to welcome to the mic the innovative mind behind Money20's event marketing, my new friend, Kathryn Frankson. You're the director of global marketing for Money20. Yep. I know you have one coming up in October here in the U.S., but it's global. We'll get a little bit more into that, but how did you get into the event world?
Yeah, so I initially came up on the advertising side of things, but I was always working in companies that were doing media and events as well. And so they were kind of going hand in hand at the time. So it was a lot on the consumer side of things, bridal events, hospitality, meetings, events. And I really liked the cadence of them. I really like the crescendo. I like building things. So I like that you're ultimately sort of shipping something that's real, that people are engaged in. But my journey through events has been in pretty much most roles. So I've gone all the way up on the sales side, from sales assistant, SDR, BDR. We call them slightly different things, account, enterprise, but moved through that whole motion. And at the time, I worked for a variety of either private or public companies. And when we were private, we were handling our own operations. We were working directly with the decorators, and we were there doing the setup. So on the operations side as well. And, in many cases, depending on what your scope was with content and how much you had on the content director side, we were putting forward some of that. So I've always enjoyed being able to taste all the different aspects of events. And then I became really interested in marketing. It felt like a natural next step of sales, because you're holding all of that audience attention. It's all funneling through your channels, and you just have to have the right perspective to manage that. So that became the new focus there. And when I started, I'd always followed Money20. It's an event that has such a cool DNA component to it. And so I'm really focused on product first marketing, if you will. And so Money20 just has that right at the core. So I was excited to come on board.
Let's talk a little bit about Money 2020, because I know strategy is very important to you. Can you share a strategy you implemented that really made an impact on the success of one of your fintech events, one of your Money 2020 events?
It's so funny. We do focus a lot on strategy, and there's so many layers to it. There's sort of core business strategy. There's the sales stuff. One that we did on the marketing side that I thought was pretty interesting last year is we decided that we wanted to lean into even more of the story that we were telling around the event for new audiences. And so we thought about that from, what's the channel perspective, right? Where do we meet new audiences? What would we say to them? What's the way to create a compelling hook and headline impact, move them into the classic marketing funnel consideration? We want to turn them into buyers. And so we moved into audio campaigns, which I thought was a really exciting new development for us. And one of the things that worked really well was the ad spots themselves and the approach that we took from introduction of the brand all the way through to the ask that you make, right? And so we made a couple of key decisions. One of them was we decided to have a little bit of we're going to create some just natural tension here. We're a live event. We're in person. That's what we were focused on. We weren't doing virtual or hybrid. We're really, really going after that in-person event experience. And so we did an A/B split of two different creatives. And one was leaning into not another virtual event, which was our way of positioning what our product was, but at the time, obviously in a really attention-getting way and creating maybe a certain feeling about that. What we also did then was we created, and I hate to use the word personas because they don't do anyone justice. We're all just real people. But we did look at obviously our audience buyers and who is the highest propensity and where should we grow and what and who are we programming for. And then we did what we sort of based it on was Sex in the City, if you will. If you remember years ago, where
that's fun.
Are you a Samantha? Are you a Carrie? But so that was kind of the thinking was instead of being it so heavy into personas, we wanted to make it really, really human. And so it was be like Drew. And it was Drew who was at our event and was a startup founder. And so it would, Drew booked 24 meetings in 36 hours. Drew got 3 rounds of funding. Drew grew his business, so it was also substantiated in a lot of those data sets, which I think was really important. But it was a real person. It was human. We supported it through the full funnel in terms of hearing really interesting and funny and creative audio ads that did not mention price or price breaks or all the stuff that events tend to really rely on. It was very brand centric. And it was just a way where we got into the minds of hopefully our buyers and said, if you're emptying the dishwasher, you're out walking the dog or you're driving, like if we really challenge ourselves, what would actually get someone's attention? And let's also be realistic about how we measure it. And let's use this as a brand play and then think about where someone's going to go from there. Maybe they are curious enough to search for us and what information can they find. And when they get to the website, and then we're going to start targeting them and doing YouTube pre-roll, can we make sure that those campaigns and those ad spots are interesting and one that makes them want to get more, because buying decisions are complex and we're a premium product. So it was a really exciting and fun, and I would say really sophisticated campaign to work on, and one where we got to the end of it and it had real impact, right? Both from impression share, brand search, new users and visitors to the website, all the way through the funnel. We're going, yeah, they're getting more information and they're making it to our pricing page. And then we had a really successful conversion factor with it as well, who people came to the event off of that. And we also know that because we're product led, what we're building in terms of that experience, what they're going to opt into, is one that we just feel really strongly about. We're really proud of. We know that they're going to get there and it's going to be something really special for them. So that, from a strategic decision, okay, we want to continue growing and serving. Great. What does that look like? Who is that? What channel supports this? What does the creative look like? How do we measure it in a way that gives it some breathing room, but we can see if it's successful or not? And do we have happy customers at the end of all of this? So it was one that end to end, it achieved a lot of what we were looking to achieve.
It must feel very exciting when you see it actually pay off. When you have an idea and you took them through, as you said, the conversion rate, was it exceptionally high? Is that what you were sort of implying? That,
it was exceptionally high. It was a very successful campaign, one that exceeded our expectations, candidly. It really did, which was gratifying because, when you're in the procurement or project management and you're going a mile deep into stuff. And I think it's also an interesting one. And a lot of teams, we don't always take the time to maybe reflect on those successes or measure things. And hindsight can be really refreshing for that, right? Because I can go, oh, it was this great end-to-end campaign, but you don't know that going into it. You're making assumptions, you're making decisions, even if you have the data on it. There's always a level of campaign activity that's subjective, right? I mean, I could float that be like Drew, and you have someone go like, yeah,
but just on the whole, be like Drew. We talk about storytelling. Yeah. They became invested in the story of Drew. Do you think that's what put it over the edge?
I do. I think so. I mean, I think we did a lot of different creative variations with it. So that it was a winner in terms of the actual performance. And we supported it through video. So we actually did at the events, at each of our live events. So at the Vegas event, if we use that as an example, because we do 3 conference and trade shows throughout the year, one in the US, one in Europe, one in Asia that we're launching. But at all of them, but at the US event, we thought of our video strategy. A lot of events, what we'll do is you send a videography team in and you take a lot of footage and you're like, oh, get happy people or people shaking hands and, people at the party and, some speakers on stage, and you weave it all together into like a little hype video and you use that. And that can be good. You want to give a flavor of what your event is. But when we were thinking about it, it's like, it's kind of done. It's been done. It's been done everywhere. And it's like, well, what's the real story happening? And it's of individual people, right? Because I also think there's this shift of events going from, even if you are a large scale event, which can be good to share. Oh, we're 5,000. Oh, we're 10,000. We're 50. We're 100,000. Because I do think it level sets an audience understanding of your event when they know the scope and size. But it's just all individual people going to your event. So what we decided to do was to tell actual stories that we thought were really meaningful. So Drew, for instance, in this actual Drew, we sent a camera crew to follow him around the event and did like 17 hours of footage. And we did the same with Yelena. We did the same with Veronique. And we did the same. So we actually followed everyone through and what were their highlights? What worked? What didn't? How did it perform? And, you have one gal who got off stage and she spoke for the first time and she called her mom. Right? Kind of like, well, yeah, that is what you do when you have a big moment. Or, when Drew, as startup and a founder, he wanted to close business. So it actually showed those experiences. So I do think it wasn't just that it was on paper, like, we should do a human-centric campaign. It was that we had so much creative to work with. It started with that really simple and sharp kind of hook and headline, as I say, be like Drew, because you just need, if someone doesn't know you, you need a reason for them to, actually listen or stop and scroll and kind of go, what is that? Even if you're really tight with your targeting. And then, we can follow that up with a YouTube video pre-roll on a fintech channel or based off of search, and someone can get that. And then we show another ad that, shows Drew closing some business. And so we kind of took everyone on this journey. And then you go to this landing page and you can actually learn more about him and see some of these other profiles. And so I think it was really human, and that piece is so important, but it also gave enough interesting creative variations and then enough data to support it where it rounded out the story that we were trying to tell.
Yeah, I was curious about how the storytelling was done in terms of selling an event where you want people to come in. And I think you made a really good point about, we had this great hype video, but isn't that what's on everyone's conference? Everyone dancing, it's the same thing. So it, becomes just like any other video, and it doesn't have any impact. So to do things a little bit different and to have them find some sort of connection, I think it definitely works. So what are your goals each year when you put together this conference? Just walk me through the process. Okay, we're in for another year. How do our goals change? What are our new objectives, and what are we ultimately trying to do this year? Is it just a very casual move the needle from where we were last year, or is it each year has its own sort of imprint of what we want to do?
It does, yeah. So we are really focused in our objective and goal setting. So we have everything from the business objectives, right, which is growth, revenue, volume, partners, press, et cetera, where we go, this is what we think is this footprint. And as a business, because that's the reality too, we're not a tech company running businesses, as a user conference or a sales we are an event organizer. And so for us, that March growth piece is really important. It's a large market. It's one where we know that we can continue to grow into it. So we do set that. So that's kind of that hard and fast foundation of it. Then there's a look at audience. So who are the audience segments within that we're continuing to serve? So you've got, the core of every event, but we've had years where blockchain and crypto sort of explode. And last year there was a real reckoning on the regulatory side. So that's a bit different. So there's also that you take that landscape, if you will, and some of those North Stars, and then you build on the audience piece. Okay, what does the industry look like? That's part of how we're designed as well, is we chose really strategically to have an arm of our content and our programming that is people from the industry. So our content teams, and for the purposes of this content around the shows, very specifically, are former fintech journalists and people who've worked at accelerators and banks and startups. So what's nice about that is we're really clued in with what our audience needs. So that's a big layer on. And then we actually do an event theme every year. So we really want something that shapes and guides what we're building, so that's kind of wrapping up the whole package. This year for us, it's human by machine, which is probably, pretty straightforward when we think of where we're at with AI and technology exploding, and yet how more connected we need to be as people and partners and relationships. And actually, as that's becoming more complex, this other side of the equation and the trust that comes with that is really important. So then we have that as a wrapper. So we have a lot of deadlines around the announcement of that, getting that out into market. And then on the campaign level, that's also where we really start to think about what are the marketing levers that we're going to pull? What are the big campaigns that we're going to choose to run? What are the timing of key product shifts and drops that we're going to do? What are we actually building? So that's kind of the funnel, if you will, that we work down, because every year at the actual event level, we have pieces that stay to the core of what we do, but there's just a ton of iteration. So stage concepts are changing. Certainly the speaker lineups are, but what we're offering for the event experience, this last year we built the Money bot, which is a big robot. We've had drone racing in the past as ways to network. We had, when we were in Vegas, we had Money Motor Circuit, which was sort of a tie-in with the racing work that was happening in the city. And all of this is centered around how our audience can come and do business in a smarter way. At our Europe show, we decided to bring in paddle boats for the lake that's behind the convention center so that they could have more intimate conversations. And that feels maybe like a better way to sit and and do meetings and have conversations than just in a really boring breakout room. And we saw an increase in startups. So we developed a startup hangout area and programmed that. So the underpinning of what we're actually building to serve that audience to then meet those goals is how we think about the structure for each event regionally each year.
I assume you have a team that you work with. Are some people on your team sort of experts in fintech? I mean, I'm sure you've learned a lot coming into this industry. So they're giving you what the trends are, what we need to focus on. From your team's point of view, what are you looking at in terms of conferences? You know, you were talking about, hey, maybe we need to have some time where they can have more intimate conversations. Where do you get your ideas for these different, types of experiences that they can go through?
Yeah, I love this question because one of the pieces of my answer is, I think, really fun, which is that we really have focused, and now our team is scaled up and grown, but on the type of people that we do hire and leaning into that creative element and really screening for that and having that be something that people are passionate about. And I say that only because events can get so hard and fast and spreadsheets and there's so much to do and the pace and things are last minute and things cost more, but our budget's right. Like we just go into that space so quickly, and the volume and mountain of details that it takes to execute an event are always going to be there. But the other piece of it is, what is your creative ethos? What is the execution that you're going to bring to the event? So as we, over the last few years, have grown and built the team, there's been a very intentional structure around, yes, hiring people who are fintech experts. So who are from the industry, understand the industry, have real relationships in the industry, are doing research every year, are having conversations every single day, not just during like a one point in time. Well, we're 3 weeks post event, so we can talk to customers, right? They're absolutely living it. They're speaking at stuff. They're developing what that story should be. So it's also not just we're going to do a call for content and we're going to get 250 speakers or 100 or whatever it is. It is absolutely focused on, we're meeting with people, we are embedded in the industry, we've done research, we're going to formulate what some of that story is and help curate it with the right voices. And that's what we're going to put in market. So yes, on the fintech expert side of things, but we also have been very intentional about hiring people who we would consider our event experts and saying, great, we want operationally and a lot on the marketing side and the sales side. What we need is people who know events, can run events, can keep making sure that we're thinking about things in the right way. We're saying no to the right things. We're saying yes to the right things. And then also the third piece of it is that we've been very intentional about hiring people from outside the industry. So those from an advertising background or a creative ad background that had nothing to do with fintech and nothing to do with events. And that Venn diagram, if you will, because we really own all of the creation of the Money20 IP, if you will, comes internally. So stage designs for Europe, when we did we realized that, there's a lot going on in the world of cannabis and in sports betting, and things are, changing really dramatically. And so that turned into a sex, drugs, and rock and roll stage at the Amsterdam show. And we realized we get a lot of press at the event and there's, deals that are happening. And so we thought, well, what if we do kind of like the White House, press room? What if we do a press briefing stage and we can break news there? Press can actually ask questions. That's not typically done at events. And we did that. Or there was an idea of, what if we have, post a keynote, you do your keynote or you do a speaking session and someone gets off the stage, and usually in that time in between, sometimes people just look at their phone and thought, what if we put a commentator box on the stage and they leave? And then it's almost like in sports, the action has happened and then it rolls over to the commentators and they're like, well, would you believe X? And so, but all of those creative ideas come from that strategic process, right? Of, we saw what happened at last year's event. We're talking to customers, what's going on in the industry, what's the makeup of our audience, and then we really challenge ourselves. This is genuinely just the day-to-day of, we will ask ourselves, like, is anyone else doing this? Is this world class? Is this really interesting? Would you take a week off from life and work and all that and go to this? Would this be really compelling? What could this be version one? If we had no constraints, what could we do? We also very much, I will say, have a culture of yes and, which I think is so important because the number of times over the last few years, I truly can't count how many calls I've received from someone in every corner of the business where they said, okay, this is maybe a silly idea. This is probably a bad idea. This is probably a dumb idea. This might be really, really crazy. Oh, this is probably nuts. And there is everything either from an absolutely perfect idea in there all the way to something where there's a kernel of something where you go, that is not crazy. That is amazing and brilliant. And what if we do this? And what if we do this? So that really that culture of ideation and safe space and yes and has unlocked huge ideas that are in a year ahead or a 5-year roadmap, or things, the show is happening in 3 weeks and we're like, oh my God, that is such a cool build. Let's add that in there. We can totally do that. So it's really the creative process is rigored in a way, but also there's just a ton of that. Share your ideas. We're going to build on them. There's so much goodness in that. And then we really try to reward that by enacting as many as we can.
Yeah, it's real important to have that openness for collaboration where there isn't necessarily wrong ideas. As an MC, when I'm working at an event, there's sometimes literally in real time that I'll see an idea, and it's those producers that I can go to and say, what if I came out and did this? And the ones that go, oh, that's a great idea. And why don't you add that, as opposed to, hey, we're about to go live in 5 minutes. I don't think this is a good idea, because that sort of stops the process. And then you can build things that you weren't even aware that was going to be there if you have that kind of culture. And it sounds like you cultivate that culture at Money 2020.
We do. I mean, we had one of our campaigns that actually ended up getting recognized in some national trade publications. We are, everyone does trends first of year, right? Or predictions or recaps and all that. And so when we do build out our campaign structure, we've got everything planned out, even if it's just at the height. We know we're going to do our predictions campaign, but then at the right point in the cycle, when we get to, okay, well, what is that actually? We were having the conversation and, we were planning for it. And someone said on our content team, they go, I don't know who the F knows even what is going to happen. No one knows. People say they know. And we were and we actually said, that's the campaign. That is it. And and we supported on it. But that was the headline, was like, who the F knows? And then we did
who the F knows. I love it.
It was literally who the F knows. And then we had a little asterisk. And then at the bottom of the email, it said F stands for fintech, of course.
Right.
And then in it, we said, but we'll take some guesses. And so there was really valuable content in it, but we ran that fully as a headline. And now that's become a series. We launched it 2 years ago and it got such good traction. And so, but it's being able to have those spaces where someone can say that, and then you actually have the latitude to go, yeah, that's spot on. Because you can say we're a disruptive brand and we're edgy and all that. And you can have a messaging framework or brand guidelines, but you don't have something like that in a brand guideline. You don't go, you can do who the F knows in your predictions campaign. So you still, even if you have the right infrastructure for your marketing and your communications and your brand guidelines, you still need that richness of those conversations and that ability to say, yes, run with that, do the Drew thing, do the who the F knows, do the sex, drugs, and rock and roll stage. Absolutely. Because you always want to toe that line. And there's things too where I see and I'm like, I love that I'm having to say this, but we're actually going to rein it back in, because you'd always rather go like, yeah, we'll just pull it in a little bit. But yeah, that's what you want. But a lot of that is just always going to have to come from that collision of ideas within teams. And so you want to make sure that you have enough of that balance and that differentiation. And when you do have that diversity of background and thought, you get these really exciting moments because you're all thinking of things differently. And that's just where a lot of that exciting new direction can come from each year.
I'm getting excited listening to you because
you got to come, Scott.
I will. It's in Vegas. I think I might be working that week, but I'll drop by.
Okay, good.
No, I'm just excited about the idea of creating something that people are not dreading going. Some people are just, they have to go there and they don't get anything, but that they're looking forward to it, that you have all these different touch points throughout the conference to get them excited, to go, hey, this is worth it for me. Look at that speaker I just saw. Look at those people. It's kind of a chain reaction, a domino effect. You need to have good content that brings people in, and therefore the attendees are going to meet the people they want to meet. Talk to me about sponsorship and selling booth space. How do you manage that as well as getting the attendees in?
Yeah, we've got, I mean, that's the exciting thing too about Money 2020, but also just working in fintech. You've got literally like the best brands in the entire world that you get to work with. So I would say what's interesting about that is we've got a big blend of obviously large scale sponsors through to varying degrees of, exhibitors, and we work with them on whatever size square footage they need. But the focus is really how much can we design that is bespoke for what a customer needs. So our floor plan in and of itself is structured really differently than most events. Usually you've got a big floor plan, you go, okay, we're going to chop it up into a big grid and we're going to sell exhibit space onto it, right? And that's kind of the holy grail. And we shifted our show floor build. And so our show floor is in a circle, which has much more of a natural flow to it. And we embed our content and stages throughout the show floor, which can maybe, sound like, okay, well, that's really nice. That's a huge shift in terms of what it means for your audience experience, in terms of where you can build stuff for sponsors and exhibitors so that they're not going to be in a dead area of a show floor, because absolutely everyone who's whatever they're investing, you want them to have the most incredible experience for their business that they can get out of it. So the show floor layout is different and unique and extremely client-centric. And then we do a lot of bespoke builds for our brands, which is really, what going to sound kind of obvious, but it's what are they looking to achieve? And then we bring in a content team. We call our creative commercial team, which I think is a really unique setup for Money 2020 that most events don't have. And that's where we build something together. So that creative commercial team is fully just focused on, whatever we want to bring to light. Let's help ideate. Let's help make it really creative and impactful. And we can advise and we can help design something that is going to be best in class. Because I think that's just also, it's certainly where events are now, but it's also where we're heading, which is the days of, okay, we bring everyone together, you do your thing, buy your space or buy your sponsorship. It's the same on the attendee side, right? Like come to the event and navigate your way around everything. The organizers are holding so much more of that curation process and a lot of that responsibility of let's partner and make sure that everyone is set up for success, that you're finding who you need to, we're doing stuff for people who are coming for the first time, we're building in networking because these events get really big, we're building in quiet time, we're helping our sponsors design something based off of what their goals are and what they want to accomplish this year. I mean, are they new? Are they established? Are they looking to launch? Are they wanting to program content? Are they wanting to do meetings? Do they need to focus on stuff? Are they looking to build an activation? Right. So all of that, we get to be really hands-on with setting up some of these partnerships so that they're before the event, everything is really designed for success, the experience, and then also what are we serving back in terms of analytics and helping them calculate ROI and measuring, because that's the reality with events is if you're doing them right, it's not just your stand, if you will. It's sort of this 365 marketing plan that you're wrapping everything in, because you can be filming and producing content. You could be doing podcasts there, videography. How many meetings are you trying to get? So we're trying to basically make it these several days of where they're filling their entire year ahead, if that's part of their goal, but where they're achieving what they need to, and we're as much of a partner in that as we can be.
See, what I'm enjoying about this conversation is everything we're talking about is, about the fintech industry, but everything can apply to any other vertical. And that you're taking a stake in everything that you're doing, everything from the content to the exhibitors, to the sponsorships that you have, that it's all integrated and it's all connected, ultimately to have an effect with the people that are attending so that they feel they have value, that they want to come back year after year, that they're going to talk about the event.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I heard during this conversation is that you can't just rely on, a playbook that you've done in the past, that each year you have to be innovating, you have to be trying new things. And to really have the passion, the passion is going to show in what you produce and they're going to feel it. And as you said, you want people to be there jazzed, excited, wanting to talk about the event and feeling at the end, hey, I'm energized, I'm here, I'm definitely going to come back next year, but I've learned a lot while I'm here. And I think that's great.
Yeah, exactly.
So Kathryn, thanks so much. This has been a pleasure meeting you, getting to know you and to learning a little bit more about your business, learning a little bit more about fintech, learning a little bit more of what we can do to make our events better. So this has been a great conversation, and we're going to thank our good friend, our mutual friend, Kate Pate, for making this happen. So Kathryn, thanks so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure. Did you have a good time?
You know what, Scott? I had a great time, and I can't wait to see you in Vegas too. I'm going to hold you to it.
I am definitely going to be there. Anyway, Kathryn, have a great day.
Thank you so much.
That's it for now. Thanks once again to eSpeakers, the #1 way to find your next perfect speaker. With the deepest catalog of professionals available, you can be assured that the speaker you book will be the absolute best speaker based on your goals, bar none. I've been your host, Scott Bloom, corporate event MC and comedic keynote speaker. And of course, your connoisseur of connections. Oh, by the way, and if you're interested, you can book me for your next event on eSpeakers Marketplace at espeakers.com/marketplace. And if you like what you heard, subscribe on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. If you loved what you heard, drop us a review, and don't forget to share with your friends. Thanks so much for listening. Now go out and make your event a great one.